Thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited to be there. My name is Benjamin Fabre. I'm DataDome co-founder and CEO. I'm super happy to have with me today Antoine Vastel, Head of Research at DataDome, and Steve Thurier, seasoned cybersecurity journalist. So today we are going to talk a lot about ChatGPT and other similar large language models. So we will talk about the benefit of the solutions, but also how they are using your content, stealing traffic, and jeopardize the brand's integrity. So we have all used ChatGPT lately. We have seen the huge impact, the positive impact on the economy, making our life simpler, going faster, more creativity, reducing the volume of repetitive tasks, etc. So it's really a game changing in many businesses. But that's come with a drawback, how ChatGPT and large language models are using the content. What's the impact on the IP? What's the impact on the share in terms of revenue and in terms of data privacy, of course. So today we are going to deep dive into all those topics. We will talk about how ChatGPT, how those LLMs are getting content to train their AI. We will then talk about the impact on all publishers, all content producers, and on their business. Then we will talk about the different technologies used behind ChatGPT, like plugins, for instance, that are crawling websites. And finally, we will have a look at the different solutions, how we can protect the content and how we can secure the revenue of all digital businesses. So welcome to all of you. I'm super excited to spend this time with you. And I will start with you, Steve. So we know that ChatGPT was trained over 300 billion words. So that's just massive. And most of those words are actually coming from digital publisher, from public websites. So my first question would be, how does the rise in popularity of ChatGPT impact online publishers and that are used to have a unique content targeting their audiences?
Well, I think it's a great impact. It's almost like 1995 again, where when the web exploded and we had to deal with this new technology, and there are many different ways to go about it. I mean, we have to decide if we're going to use it in our news coverage, for marketing. Are we going to use it for more lower end stories? Is it going to be what the publishers seem to be saying? Is that ChatGPT can handle like the menial tasks and leave reporters open to do more enterprise reporting. So there might be an increase in more investigative and enterprise reporting. So that's a possibility. There are just many questions. All publishers are particularly online publishers run on very small operations. So they're looking at this most of my clients are looking at this very closely and trying to come to grips with this. It's still very new.
Interesting. And Antoine, on your side, so as head of research at DataDome, fighting bots every single day, I know that most of our customers have reached out to us asking about ChatGPT, about what we are seeing on the security side. So what's your view on that? What's the bot issue that you've seen lately with ChatGPT and LLMs?
I think the reason our customers contact us about ChatGPT, which is a chatbot and which is completely unrelated to the kind of bot we protect against, is because to train ChatGPT or all these large language models, you need data. Basically, you need data, and more importantly, you need human-generated data. You don't want to train your machine learning model with words that have been written by another AI. You want content that has been written by humans. To get this data, at such a huge scale, you need bots. So you need scraper bots in particular. And so a lot of our customers are asking, what they can do to get protected against these bots that may be targeting them to get this huge volume of data. From a security risk, not only a bot risk, but from a security risk, what may happen is that some private data that may be available on your website publicly, but that may be difficult to access, it may be suddenly easily accessible because it has been indexed by a large language model. And so anyone asking a question in a chat could easily retrieve information about your users. While it was still public, that may not have been the use case you intended in the end. And there are other risks as well that are not purely security risk in the sense of cybersecurity, but it's still a risk from a business or economical point of view. The first thing is that it can damage your source reputation and credibility, and also the viewers of your content may not know the full context and the source of your content because they may access it completely, in a random place, not on your website, on your mobile app, but in a chat or in a plugin, as we will talk after. And you may have, smart people actually, using your content to monetize it without your knowledge through different kind of plugins, for example.
Well, I think that we've had a prima facie case, like a real example of what not to do with CNET earlier this year, where where the Futurist published a story, and they were found to have been running stories that were generated by ChatGPT. And it turned out, I think they generated something like 90, according to the reports, they generated something like 90 stories, and 45 of them were inaccurate. People were calling in, they pointed out the inaccuracies. And I think here's an example of, I commend CNET for jumping into the technology and for embracing it. I think it's an example of just like too much too soon and not really thinking through all the implications. For example, the Associated Press is using ChatGPT to do sports scores, like recaps of games, those kinds of things. And then the financial publications like Bloomberg, Dow Jones, Reuters are using ChatGPT, LLMs to do like stock, this stock was up 50 cents, this stock was down 26%. I think those kinds of stories lend themselves to being used by the chatbot. They're also, I think McClatchy was also using them to post real estate listings. There's a way to do it, there's a way not to do it. Like I said, most of my clients are kind of evaluating these kinds of like low-level experimentations make a lot more sense to me than deciding that you're going to totally change your business model and jump into AI and completely change things. I think people are just afraid that they're going to miss the boat or that it's moving so fast that it's just going to run right by them.
And yourself, as a great content producer, have you already experienced any issue with your content being used to train LLMs? And what's your thought on the potential impact for journalists?
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, we had talked about this a few days ago. And I did a search that said Steve Zurier and Microsoft. And it came back and said Steve Zurier has written extensively about Microsoft for many years. He's an experienced technology journalist, that kind of thing. But said, if you want more detail on articles by Steve Zurier, I suggest you do an online search. Basically, it said that data banks our history only goes back to September 2021. They didn't have the history. I guess the short answer to your question is I'm really not afraid that the LLMs are going to steal my content. And if they do, there may be like an incomplete, they really are not equipped to be able to do the kinds of things that Google does or a search engine does in terms of searching for stories right now. Now, can they do it down the line? Probably so. It's still the early days, and it was just kind of an interesting exercise. I've also done searches on various people, friends of mine, family members, and actually, here's a funny one. My son was a music student at Cal Arts, California Institute of the Arts. I did a search on my son, Benjamin Zurier, and it said that Ben had performed all around the world, in Africa and South America and Europe. He has performed it with the LA Philharmonic and all these different things. So evidently what ChatGPT did was they conflated information about Cal Arts professors and maybe like the famous people who had been at Cal Arts over the last 10, 20, 30 years, and then superimposed it onto Ben, and it made Ben look like he was just like a total music hero. The long and short of it is, we're in the early days, and coming out of RSA, it just seemed like there was just a lot of the hype level was very high in terms of what ChatGPT could do, and that we're looking like moving towards Black Hat in August. We're looking to like perhaps there might be a more sober view. And then just in terms of our coverage, what I found is that the people who really are working with this stuff seem to be saying that you can do coding, like you can do coding with ChatGPT, and the coding is good. It still needs a human being to verify it and to check up on it. You can't just, dispatch ChatGPT and expect that it's going to develop all this code and develop all your applications, and it can save time and it can be a really good tool, but it still has to be managed.
For sure. So yeah, it definitely needs a human in the loop. But that brings us to the question, how ChatGPT is able to get all this content and how they are training the AI, even if they are not up to date sometimes. But that's something that we've seen that is changing with not the plugins, for instance. So Antoine, can you describe a bit behind the scene how ChatGPT is getting content online to train the AI?
Yeah, most of the details we have for ChatGPT are related to ChatGPT 3. For the latest versions, we don't have more details regarding the data training process and data sources. But for ChatGPT 3, what they publish is that they used 4 main data sets, but the biggest one was the command crawl data set, which represents something like more than 60% of the training set. And then it's other data sets openly accessible, like web text, a book dataset, and Wikipedia. But this is only true for the version 3. For the latest versions, we don't know more. And it's the same with Google. Google has a competitor of ChatGPT, which is named Bard. And the situation is really blurry. They talked about their model based on the Lambda language model in a research paper. And it was trained on the trillions of words, but they don't give more details. They just say that it's words that were, from the public dialog data and other public web documents. They don't give more details. They remain quite vague about it, about the origin of the public data and how it was collected. And it's clearly possible that, Google is running the biggest scraper on Earth, Googlebot. I mean, we can't really exclude the fact that they used it as a way to gather data and feed this data to their, language model.
Interesting. So as far as I understand, Google is not completely transparent on the way they are fetching the content. ChatGPT neither, because they are not claiming their name when they are crawling websites. Have you seen other scrapers and user agents while you were digging into our huge volume of data?
I was curious. I went on the OpenAI documentation blog. One of the things that caught my attention was ChatGPT plugins. So ChatGPT plugins, they are a way to connect large language models like ChatGPT with external tools. And one of the use cases they allow, for example, is to access external data available on the web. So one of the main limits of ChatGPT you discussed, Steve, was that it's not aware of the latest data. It's the training data set was frozen in 2021. But what if you want to know something that happened yesterday or even today? You can't do it as of today. There are a few features being developed. Typically, plugins are a way to interact easily between large language models and, for example, external content available on the web. I had a look at OpenAI documentation. Okay, what are these plugins? What can they do? What kind of content they can request? And what OpenAI say is that requests with the ChatGPT user agent come from the ChatGPT plugins. It doesn't mean that all requests coming from ChatGPT plugins will have a ChatGPT user agent. And actually, that's what we observed. We did a simple test, with 2 plugins. One was Webpilot and the other one was Link Reader, which are 2 plugins that enable users to interact with the content available on the web, to summarize it, for example. What we observed is that we didn't observe any ChatGPT user agent. We observed in one case headless Chrome, and in another situation, it was a Node.js, HTTP client library. So in the two cases, it was not a ChatGPT user agent. And the reason is simple, actually, is that the request is coming from the plugin company's infrastructure. So the plugin is a way to make a bridge between ChatGPT and external content. But in the end, the request is made by the plugins company infrastructure. And they can do HTTP requests the way they want. They can do it using, Node.js, Python, Go, a real browser, headless browser, whatever they want. And so in this case, you can't just rely on the user agent to detect them. You need to use traditional bot detection techniques, because bots won't necessarily declare their presence in the user agent.
So that's kind of crazy. So that means ChatGPT and ChatGPT plugins, they don't assume what they're doing by using their own name in the user agent, but they're using, as far as I understand, pretty sophisticated bots using advanced techniques like using headless browsers, clean IP addresses, etc. So that's something that is really surprising when we think that OpenAI is a pretty large company now, and that is doing a lot of communications around what they are doing. And what can publishers do to prevent ChatGPT and LLMs from scraping their websites?
The official documentation provides a few recommendations. Basically, you can update your robots.txt file to exclude the CC bot, which is, the bot, the scraper used by the main data set ChatGPT was trained on, but it was for the ChatGPT 3. So is it still the case? Will they respect it or not? It's not quite explicit on the website. I would say if you want to be safe, until now we talked about ChatGPT, we talk about Google with Bard, but a lot of companies are raising money, to train large language models, and they may not get access to data as easily as Google or OpenAI with Microsoft, but they will still need to get access to high quality data. That's a bullet point we see in most fundraising for these kind of companies. And so if they need to get access to data to train their models, they will use the traditional techniques. So they will use proxies to distribute their scraping. They will forge a fingerprint. They will adapt their behavior. And so it means that in this case, basically, you will need to protect your website using traditional bot detection techniques, using bot detection vendors, typically. But if you do it, you should be careful. Like if you want to block bots yourself, because you of course you don't want to block all the bots. Some of them are good from a SEO point of view. You want your content to be indexed, for example, by Google. You still want Google bots to visit your website to make it easily searchable by human users that may want to buy your products or read your articles.
Yeah, so that means fighting against those bots is quite complex. And it's not just a matter of managing a good bot like a Google bot, but it's like managing scrapers, anonymous scrapers that are going on your website. It's funny because I remember in DataDome early days, when we had to classify and authentifying the verified bots, we had to think about common crawler, because when you go on their website, they are kind of unclear about the usage of the data. So if you have a look at what they're saying, it sounds like they are scraping the content just to create a huge data set for everyone, like archive.org is doing. But actually, they are generating business thanks to the data they are crawling. And then a few years later, it got used by OpenAI. So yeah, always be careful with scrapers and always apply the proper bot mitigation in place. And Steve, what's your view on the SEO for publishers?
It's a little bit of beyond my expertise, but I would say that anything that's going to interfere with our stories being registered and viewed by Google is going to be a concern. I mean, that's the name of the game, particularly online publishers. We exist to be able to write these stories and get them via Google. All I really can say is that I know this is being evaluated by a lot of the people I work with. It's just become a concern because you don't want to cut up Google, because it's really like how you drive traffic to the site. I just would say that anything that's going to stop that relationship is going to be a real concern to publishers.
Yeah, sure. And we have a question related to that in the chat, which is, do we want to have ChatGPT knowing your products, because that can bring visibility, etc. So that's definitely a very good question, and that's probably one of the complexity of the topic. You do want to have ChatGPT knowing your brand, your products, but you don't want to have users just log in ChatGPT prompt without reaching your website. And that's why our customers are turning to us saying, well, what could be the best strategy to still have the visibility from Google, from the major search engines, from the social network bots, but also from ChatGPT to a certain extent. Moving on that, about the monetization of the content, we are seeing a growing numbers of content producers that now want to generate revenue from their content and from the usage of their content. So how would that work, Antoine?
the most recent and the well-known one is probably Twitter, that wanted to monetize their content through an API. That's the most simple use case. You have a valuable human-generated content and you want to make it accessible through an API. You may, of course, you will price this API, based on the usage. Maybe you want to provide SLA, etc. One thing to keep in mind is that, people may not be willing to pay for your API if they can get the data for free by scraping your website. And actually, that's what happened with Twitter. Then people just started to scrape the content. So they had to enforce rate limiting techniques to limit the amount of data that could be retrieved. And just in reality, apparently, it was to save that infrastructure because the scrapers were making so many requests. Apparently, it was worse than just requesting the API. But that's not only for Twitter, actually. Whenever you have valuable data, if you try to monetize them, people, they will try to scrap your website and get them for free. Even if they need to pay for proxies, it may be less costly, actually, to go the scraping way. If you want to prevent unauthorized access, unauthorized scrapers, and you want people to actually pay you for your API, when you are designing your monetization strategy through an API, for example, you need to take into account that if you don't protect your content, people are not going to pay for your API. Most of the people, some companies may be willing to pay for it to have SLAs or stability in the structure of the data, but clearly, most of the people will try to use a scraper, and you need to take this into account from the beginning. You need to find the right equilibrium, between making it too expensive to access the data through your API. And you also need probably to take into account the price of bot detection on your website, because without it, it would be almost impossible to monetize your content.
Cool. So I'm seeing a lot of questions coming about this fine line between what you want to be train inside OpenAI and LLMs and what you don't want. And that's a very good business question. We have, for instance, on the media side, most of them, they don't want to have the full content of their article produced by great talented journalists being completely trained inside ChatGPT, and then with users being able to query this AI without reaching the mainstream media, for instance, because that means they've paid journalists, but they don't get the revenue from ads or from subscription. If we talk about e-commerce websites, retailers, then it's a more strategical authorization that we can put in place. Some of them, they want to just let the homepage, then some product page, but not necessarily all the content of white papers, for instance, of all the stock or the pricing, because at the moment the scraper is coming, the price might not be accurate a few weeks, months, years later. Our customers, they are using us to make sure that they share the right level of information to all LLMs. It can be information around the brand, around the product with some description, but not some specific information that might be not accurate a few weeks later. And that also might reduce the need of users to reach the website to either get the content or buy the product. That's definitely a strategy that have to be put in place by any digital business in every single industry, in the media, in e-commerce, retailers, social networks, etc. And that's what we are doing every single day. We have a lot of questions, but unfortunately we are running out of time. I want to say a huge thank you to Antoine and Steve, and a thank you to all the listeners and the viewers today. We are a huge number, and I'm super excited about that. Feel free to reach out if you have any upcoming question, if you want to deep dive into the bots used by those LLMs, and if you want to test DataDome and to have a proper understanding of what is accuracy without compromise. Thank you again, and talk to you soon. Bye.